So I'm thankful for the opportunity to be here and to spend a little bit of time. And because I want to spend some time just talking about some of the things that we have coming up. And being very honest about the fact that we have two very distinct storms that we have to navigate. And two very real storms that we've got to navigate. The first, as the congressman mentioned, is that we in this state face a historic budget crisis, the likes of one that we have not seen in decades. And the second, we're about to swear in a new administration in Washington, D.C., and anytime you have change and uncertainty in an area of Washington, D.C. that has such close connection to the state of Maryland, we know that that casts a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And so in thinking about the message that I wanted to spend some time and share this evening, I was reminded of a slogan that holds a special significance to the state of Maryland, and especially this weekend. Because this weekend, for all those who celebrate, it is Army-Navy weekend. I love the fact that we are the home of the Naval Academy. I love the fact that on 364 days of the year, the Navy will never find a bigger champion than me. But on that one day of the year, go Army, beat Navy. I'm just saying. Now, while I am an Army guy, I respect a motto that the Navy holds on to. Don't give up the ship. Now, that motto actually comes from the War of 1812. In the War of 1812, when you had a Navy captain named Captain Lawrence, who was commanding the USS Chesapeake. And as he was fighting the British and was shot, as he realized that he was going to lose this battle and he was going to lose this life, the final words that he said were a command to his shipmates. Don't give up the ship. That became the rallying cry. And that now, if you go to the United States Naval Academy, those words are all over the yard. Don't give up the ship. So tonight, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the two storms that we have gathering. And finding a way that in this moment, Maryland is going to collectively say with one distinct voice, we won't give up the ship. So first, we know that Maryland is staring down the biggest budget crisis in the last 20 years that I know, and I was clear when literally the first time I had a chance to speak with MACo, when I was just governor-elect, that I understood that we inherited bloated budgets and sluggish growth and a structural deficit. That from 2017 to 2022, the national economy grew by 11%. The national economy grew by 11%. At the same time frame, Maryland's economy grew by 3%. Maryland's economy grew by 1/4 of the national pace. We've ranked consistently low on measurements of affordability and wages, and population size, and employment. And high prices around the country have also been affected by how much money moves through our economy. So even though we weren't growing, one thing I did know is that we were spending. Because during that same time period, when we had 3% economic growth, Maryland's state budget increased by 70%. So we were spending, we just weren't growing. And I know that this isn't exactly a politically convenient thing to say, but bigger budgets do not always correlate to better results. And that is distinctly true when you have slow economic growth. So now Maryland and every state in the nation was benefiting from the billions of dollars of federal money that got us through the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's be clear, billions of dollars from the federal government is not a structural surplus, it is a sugar high. Because that money that came in from the federal government was not fixing our structural deficits. It was masking the problems. And over the last 2 years, our administration has made targeted cuts and responsible investments to help to narrow the budget gap. We've prioritized government efficiency and data, where for 2 years in a row, we've actually decreased the size of state government, working to spend smarter to get the results that matter. And a few months ago, we used a data-backed approach to tackle childhood hunger, and that strategy has helped us to feed an additional 500,000 Maryland children when school meals were unavailable during school breaks. Since taking office, I've introduced and signed legislation to support our entrepreneurs and build access to work and wages and wealth. We've improved coordination in public safety to help make our community places where families want to live and work and grow. And according to preliminary data, just this year, homicides are now down in the state of Maryland 13% year on year. Auto theft is down 26% year on year. Non-fatal shootings are down 27% year on year. And that includes an additional historic drop that we saw from last year. And we also made the choice to invest in childcare and ensure that more Marylanders could join the workforce without a college degree. I have been very clear. We have some of the best four-year colleges in America in this state. But I also want to be very clear. We are going to end this myth that every single one of our children must attend one of them in order to be economically successful. So today, Maryland has amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country at 2.9%. And just 3 weeks ago, Maryland was ranked the top state in the country for minority-owned businesses. So we are moving forward. But while we're moving forward, let's be clear that the fiscal challenges we are facing that are almost a decade in the making cannot be solved in less than 2 years. Since at least 2017, the Department of Legislative Services has been forecasting a structural budget deficit in the state of Maryland, and now those predictions have come to pass. So as we head into 2025, our state is now faced with a $2.7 billion structural deficit and budget shortfall. So as we take a look at this budget crisis, we also see another storm quickly approaching. Maryland is always affected by the outcome of any presidential election because Maryland and the federal government are deeply intertwined. The federal government is, by far, Maryland's biggest employer, with over 160,000 federal employees who call our state home. Federal funds account for 30% of our annual state budget, and this money goes towards everything from supporting healthcare, to income security, to education, to transportation, to housing, to labor, to the environment. It incorporates all of it. And Maryland is uniquely reliant on our federal coffers. And historically, that actually means that our state has been able to coast, that our state's been able to move with that comfort. But as a result, it also means we are remarkably vulnerable to changes in our nation's capital. Now, many of the decisions that will be made inside the White House will be out of our control. Those decisions, though, will have a very direct impact on our state, and they will have a very direct impact on our local governments. So I do want to be very, very clear. I am ready, and we are eager to work with the incoming administration to advance the interests of Marylanders. And I remember I had someone ask me before, he said, do you plan on being the leader of the resistance? And I said, no, I plan on being the governor of Maryland. We've got 6.5 million people all across the state who deserve nothing less, who deserve us, and who deserves a state government that is willing to work with anybody and everybody in places that we can partner in order to get the job done on behalf of the people who put us in these seats in the first place. And I do believe that there are real spaces for alignment, including in areas of transportation and including areas of infrastructure. And at a time that we are facing a very real fiscal crisis, we also know this: we cannot just simply rely on the federal government to fill in the gaps of our balance sheet. We cannot rely on single points of failure in order to move this state forward. Now, I know these storms are daunting, but I also know this, and I've seen it in the way we've worked together even in these first 2 years. We don't run away from big challenges. We run towards them, and we come up with solutions together. And the answer to make it through each of these storms fundamentally comes down to one word: growth. If our economy was growing more rapidly, the truth is we would not be dealing with a structural deficit. The reason we are dealing with a structural deficit is you cannot have budgets increasing by 70% and a GDP of 3%. That creates a delta. That means massive structural deficits. This is not politics, it is math. And if our economy was growing more rapidly, we could better withstand any challenges or any changes that might happen in other administrations. So the truth is, we need to grow. It is the key to securing Maryland's future. And listen, I spent a lot of time around balance sheets. I want to be clear. Anyone who thinks we can just cut our way to greater prosperity is either not being honest, is politically motivated, or does not know what they're talking about. However, anyone who also thinks you can just tax your way to greater prosperity, frankly, is not being honest either. Now is a time when we've got to make tough choices. Now is a time when we've got to be honest. Now is a time when we say we just cannot kick cans down the road and leave it for other people to figure it out. That this is going to be the time when we have got to build a durable economy, one that is unapologetically business-friendly and one that actually invests in growth. And in the next few days, I will be signing an executive order centering around strengthening Maryland's economic competitiveness. This executive order that I will sign in the next few days will be the most sweeping economic executive action that I have taken since becoming the 63rd governor of this state. And it has three main parts. The first, our executive order will streamline the permitting process, making it easier for businesses to be able to come and grow and stay in the state of Maryland. Other leaders from around the country are moving forward with permitting reform to drive growth, while still being good environmental stewards. And if Maryland does not do the same, Maryland will fall behind. We cannot attract businesses if it takes years to get a permit from the state or years to get permits from local jurisdictions. We need to cut the red tape that slows down this process. Arbitrarily, miserly, and foolishly. And my executive order will help us to do exactly that. Second, This executive order will initiate an all-of-government strategy to prioritizing sectors that Maryland is poised to win at. Because our state's economy, frankly, if you think about it, it's focused on three main areas, and it's kind of been like that for decades. It's the eds, the feds, and the meds. That's kind of Maryland's economy. And frankly, when you look at our balance sheets, I looked at these balance sheets, and literally, we call it like, it's like the peanut butter balance sheet. Kind of everything's kind of spread evenly. Now, I know this, for the eds and the feds and the meds, we are always going to protect our legacy assets. But we cannot solely rely on them. And we need to build on the foundation that they've laid out. So we have spent these past months getting into the weeds, studying the data, and asset mapping this state. And our administration has identified 3 new core areas that will be central to our future growth. They are life sciences, IT, and aerospace and defense. These are the 3 areas that will open the door to economic dominance in a modern economy. And I'm talking about areas like cybersecurity and computational biology. I'm talking about areas like artificial intelligence and quantum computing. These are the areas where Maryland is uniquely positioned to win because we have the right assets. Maryland is the home of NIST. Maryland is the home of NASA Goddard. Maryland is the home of Fort Meade. Maryland is the home of U.S. Cyber Command. Maryland is the home of the UMD system. Maryland is the home of the biohealth cluster. Maryland is the home of the NSA. Maryland is the home of every single acronym known to man exists in the state of Maryland. Including, by the way, the new FBI building, which is coming to Prince George's County. We have got to uplift these assets. These are assets that are tethered to the state of Maryland. So while we have other states beating us in life sciences, beating us in cyber, makes absolutely no sense. And it means, yes, and it means we are leaving capital on the table. And those days have got to stop. We've got to uplift these assets because doing otherwise wouldn't just be foolish, it will be derelict. Maryland is ready to bet big on the future. And we know it works because we've seen other states do it. We saw how Massachusetts decided that it was going to bet big on biotech. When Massachusetts said, well, you know, we're the home of Harvard and MIT. Why will we not invest in it? And they did. And do you know where the global home of biotech is right now? Massachusetts. We saw what happened in Kentucky, where Kentucky decided to invest in EV battery technology. And I'm good friends with Andy Bashir, and besides the bourbon, I'm not sure why they think that they have anything better than anyone else on EV battery technology. And besides, our rye is better than their bourbon, but that's a whole nother conversation. But they bet big on it. And guess what? The national home for EV battery technology right now is Kentucky. Because they made a bet. It's time that Maryland starts making some bets. So let's be clear. I want Maryland to be the best state in the country to do business for any industry. But focus. Focus and strategy is how we will attract, how we will retain, and how we will grow businesses and investments and talent. And it's what we will do going forward. And that brings me to the 3rd key element of our executive order: coordinating economic development efforts with local governments. The state of Maryland can do everything in our power to drive economic growth. But if we're not aligned with you, if we're not aligned with our local jurisdictions, we'll have nothing. Our economic destinies are tied together. And that's why my executive order directs all parts of our administration to ensure better coordination with local governments to drive economic growth. These are the 3 key pieces of the executive order: permitting reform and regulatory reform, making big bets on life sciences and IT and aerospace and defense, and improving coordination with our local partners. And in order to support that kind of growth, our administration will also demand that there are still 2 items that we have to address tonight, because both of them are prerequisites in order to make Maryland desirable for businesses and desirable for industries. And those 2 things are this. I'm talking about investing in world-class schools and increasing housing supply. So first, let's talk about education. We know that a world-class education system is a necessity for all of our dreams and all of our hopes as chief executives, and also it is the foundation for all of our hopes and our dreams for our future generations, who is our job to protect. And the blueprint for Maryland's future is and will remain a central part of our education strategy. But if legislative history is any teacher, we know 2 things about the laws of enormous significance. They must always be refined after they've been passed, and they cannot succeed alone. So remember this. The law that created Social Security was a big idea. An idea where people said we are going to find ways of actually being able to protect people and protect older Americans. And that law was amended 12 times. We know this. The Maryland Constitution is the foundation in which all of us live. And it is the framework and the laws that guide our existence. And the Maryland Constitution has been amended 200 times. The passage of the blueprint wasn't the end of the work on education. It was the beginning. In our first year, we introduced the Educator Shortage Act to improve the teacher pipeline. And to date, we have seen a 25% reduction in teacher vacancies since that law took effect. That this past session, I signed a new Grow Your Own program to expand student-teacher stipends and to train more teachers. In our first 2 years, I think we have shown that you are not going to find a bigger believer in Maryland's public schools and Maryland's public school education, and a believer that they need the financial support, where we have increased state funding to our public schools by 50% in our first 2 years compared to my predecessor's first 4 years. But now, the work continues, and we must be honest about where we are. This legislative session, I will introduce an education bill that builds on the blueprint to help ensure that our children receive a world-class education. And this piece of legislation will take aim at the biggest single challenge that we face in education, and that is the ongoing Maryland teacher shortage. Today, 4% of our classroom positions are unfilled. That's nearly 1,600 classrooms of children without an experienced educator in front of them. 6,000 educators are teaching under provisional certification, which means they are not fully trained, and it means they are not fully licensed. If we do not get high quality, high trained, and a dedicated teacher in every single classroom, the blueprint itself will be bound to fail. And so, this new piece of legislation will tackle the teacher shortage in 2 major ways. First, we will build on the foundation of the Educator Shortage Act by proposing new efforts to strengthen the teacher training pipeline. Second, we will issue reforms to the blueprint for Maryland's future. The blueprint calls for increased time for educators to engage in curriculum planning and grading and professional development outside of the classroom. This time is something that we commonly call collaborative time. It ensures that our educators have additional breathing room to work together, to sharpen their skills, and to better support their students. But I want to be clear, teachers should be treated like professionals and empowered to work together outside of the classroom. But we've got to think critically about this implementation. And we need to do the hard work of first strengthening the teacher pipeline before these other structures can work. Because it's hard to have meaningful collaborative time for people when no one is even in the building. So we would need an estimated 15,000 more teachers to implement collaborative time successfully. And so this year, I will propose a pause in the implementation of collaborative time provisions in the Blueprint for Maryland's future. Our goal is to give school districts time and space to recruit and retain enough teachers to make this plan actually work. And while we pause collaborative time, I will also be proposing new short-term grants to schools and districts that want to experiment with collaborative time models to make sure that it works for your own individual jurisdictions. I believe in the promise of the Blueprint. And I definitely believe in the promise of our children. But the realization of that promise doesn't come through strict adherence to formulas at all costs. The realization of that promise comes from making sure that our investments are actually linked to student success. Our fidelity is to our students. They are not to our formulas. And we will implement the parts of the Blueprint that we know work, including investments in preschool and early education, and a focus on early literacy and a focus on tutoring. We will focus on things like career technical education and things that we know we already have strong pipelines and have built out strong pipelines. And we will pause the elements that need a closer look or require laying a stronger foundation for full implementation. And we will continue to craft and pass legislation that elevates education and makes necessary adjustments that we see fit. To win this decade, we need to provide a world-class education to every student. That will be our pledge. That will be our push. 15,000 is our target to implement collaborative time. We will get there. However, we need to put in the work to make sure this can work. And while we move forward in education, I want to talk about that second piece and start with a number. 96,000. That's the housing gap in our state. We have a shortage of over 96,000 homes. It's a shortage that is dragging down affordability. It's a shortage that is dragging down economic growth. It's a shortage that is driving down business growth. Now, since my inauguration, we have worked together to help create over 50,000 new jobs in the state of Maryland. And I want to tell you, CEOs are taking notice. CEOs want to be a part of what we're doing. I spent a good portion of my week talking to CEOs and not just recruiting them to come to the state of Maryland, but taking a lot of incoming because people are realizing when we say this is Maryland's decade, they're starting to believe it. But I can tell you this, in every single conversation that I have with the CEO, one of the first questions that they will ask me is about housing. When I talk to students, they will tell me that they are thinking about leaving the state of Maryland and going to a different state because of high housing costs. And we know that 1 in 3 younger Marylanders is considering leaving the state just for that simple reason. When I talk to teachers and police officers, they tell me they're sure if they can continue to make rent or save up for a housing down payment. If we don't address housing, we are never going to see our full potential. And so this past year, we worked together and with the General Assembly to pass the most comprehensive housing package of any governor in recent history. And it's not lost to me that our housing package couldn't have gotten passed without the full partnership and the insight and the push of MACo. So I want to thank this community for always coming to the table to address tough issues, and I'm coming to you again to say, while I'm proud of the work we have gotten done, we have got more work to do, and we are coming back for more. We cannot have an honest conversation about growing our economy without directly addressing the issue of housing supply. And we cannot address the affordability crisis if we do not address the issue of housing supply. So in this upcoming session, I will introduce legislation to ensure that we are building more housing in the state of Maryland and creating more pathways for people to become homeowners and have an opportunity for more renters to be able to own a piece of the American dream. In the coming weeks, you're going to hear more details about our legislative package and our budget. And in every piece of our agenda, you will see a very clear focus on economic growth. We're locked in, and we're laser focused on being able to make sure that Maryland get this right. Growth, that is the most powerful tool that we have in our toolbox, but it is not and it cannot be the only one. We're in a moment of profound consequence, and if we're willing to use every tool in our toolbox, it means we will get Maryland's fiscal house back in order. There will be choices in this new budget that some of you might not like. I mean, shit, there's a lot of things in this new budget that I don't like. But it's time to make hard choices. It's time to understand that not everything is going to be yes. And if we make the hard choices now, we will be able to unleash the potential that our state needs and our future requires. We will continue to protect the assets and the areas that matter most to Marylanders, like education and healthcare, and childcare and transportation and public safety and housing. And as we closely evaluate spending levels, we are going to work with our performance cabinet to ensure that where we do spend money, that we are going to get a strong return on that investment. Because all of us are going to be governing together in a moment of both challenge and opportunity for our state. It will require a measure of discipline and grace from each and every one of us. There will be moments when all of us will get frustrated and overwhelmed. But in Maryland, we won't give up the ship, no matter how tough the waves or how tough the surf, because that's who we are. I know the people in this room. I know the strength and courage that each and every one of you have. I know the fact that we've had to navigate difficult times, and you've been good partners, and this administration has tried to be good partners to you too. And I see what happens when we choose to work together. I saw it just a few weeks ago on the Eastern Shore, when we broke ground on a new hospital just a few weeks back, marking the first major investments in rural health care that this state has seen in a long time. When other states are retreating from rural health care, Maryland chooses to lean in. I saw it in Mountain, Maryland, where I had the chance to meet with leaders in Washington County's Public Safety Center who are helping us and working together to make sure that we are stemming violent crime. At a time when Marylanders are calling us to prioritize public safety, we are choosing to invest in it. I saw it in Southern Maryland at the Oasis Fresh Food Market, a place that was the first fresh food market that we had seen in the county in generations. I saw it just earlier today in Prince George's County with the announcement of the Enough Act, where 27 jurisdictions across the state of Maryland, in urban, rural, and suburban parts of the state, all just received grant because Maryland chose to work together and make the most full frontal and bipartisan assault on child poverty, making Maryland the first state in this country that is making a state-led, place-based investment strategy to end concentrated poverty as we know it. I saw it in Baltimore after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed, when we came back stronger than ever, and as the congressman said, when people said it would take 11 months to clear that channel, we did something unique and we worked together. And we got it cleared in 11 weeks. This is what we do. We actually choose to work together on things. And we make the impossible very, very possible for the people of our state. We refuse to run in the other direction when we see storms coming. We are going to navigate them both together, and we will emerge stronger. Because there are some people who look at challenge and they turn away. One thing people are learning about this team in this moment, we don't flinch. We're not built that way. That's been shaken from us a long time ago. We stand up. We get things done. We're built differently. And by meeting this moment head on, we're going to show the people of this state what it means to leave no one behind. We are grateful for you, for your energy, for your leadership, for your push, for your trust. Because we're not just going to meet this moment. We're going to show everybody what it means to be Maryland tough. So God bless you guys, and thank you so much, and happy holidays and Merry Christmas to each and every one of you.